Thank you. Thank you.
I will be the moderator for this session. Our topic today will be single parents, and welcome everybody. Thank you for coming to PGM SDG. And for the single parents, there's a lot of location that need to be covered, a lot of issues and everything, but we try to make it comprehensive for the writers. So without further ado, I will keep the balls rolling lah. Okay, so I will explain. The writer will have 20 minutes to present the reports, and then the external reviewer will have 10 minutes to review papers, and then we have 1 hour to discuss about the single parents paper. Okay, I give it to Ms. Omna.
Sure. Hi everyone. Thank you for being here. I shouldn't say thank you. I feel already nervous, right? Yeah, but thanks so much for this opportunity. And I think it's really valuable that we're able to not only write it, but have people who will help us critique it, if you like, constructively, and see how we can do better, right? Before we face the policymakers, right? So this round is very important. So let's go to the next one. So here I don't know how I'm going to do this in 20 minutes. I'll attempt, and then we'll see how it goes. Otherwise, we have a total of 1.5 hours, correct? Mm-hmm. Yes. All right, so I'll just do a quick overview, which most of you must have read. The introduction, look at the methodology, which is quite straightforward, and then looking at contextualizing single parent, the demographic, and then do a bit of the discussion, which is really the Suara Akar Umbi. Yeah, and then look at the recommendations and conclusion. Is that okay? Right. So the is it possible to move that, because it's covering some little online blocks? So it doesn't cover my content. She can do it on the laptop.
We have the mouse.
Every time this happens, we're going to pause the clock. Right? Okay, so very quickly, just an overview, we all know is that Malaysia is witnessing a growing number of single parents, right? We had a big announcement last year. Okay, with the predominance of single mothers, and they are considered one of the most vulnerable and often referred to as the poorest of the poor in any country. Now, monitoring the SDGs at the local level has validated single-parent families as high-risk population, living precarious lives compounded by insecure livelihoods, shouldering multiple care responsibilities, experiencing mental stress, poor and inaccessible social protections and support safeguards. And so a multidimensional nature of their challenges and barriers threatens to push this population, if we don't address it, now it's 1 million, into poverty while posing a real threat to the well-being of the family, which is another huge issue. So the situation analysis will focus on the low-income single mother households while touching on issues confronting single fathers. It aims to examine APPGM's findings from its qualitative research in 27 parliamentary and rural and semi-rural constituencies involving single mothers and some single fathers, civil society organizations, community leaders, and so on and so forth, to provide policy recommendations and to mitigate the harmful impacts of faced by single parents, strengthen the support systems, and empower social mobility, right? So, both and all. Okay, it's fine. Okay, so very basically, and this will be the methodology, I think, for all. The focus group discussions, followed by the issue mapping, the thematic analysis, and then the desk review, right? So just to go into the introduction, I'll just do this very quickly, a lot more detail, and it's expanded on in the actual document, the CTAN. Now, so we know there's a growing B40 household population by virtue of even now the 500,000 M40 will drop down. It's a growing number. It's worrying, especially with the economic crisis before us. We also in the Sitan have talked about the feminization of poverty, right? Which we know that is a relative poverty among female-headed households. This was reported in the VNR 2021, right? They remained high at 27.3%, unchanged between 2016 and 2019. So it's a quite high number, but higher compared to male-headed households, which registered a relative poverty of 14. So it's quite a big gap there. The other thing is also targeting female-headed households becomes an important means to combat poverty. And in that female-headed poverty increases when a 5-dimension monetary poverty, economic, access to infrastructure, health, it's just like a multidimensional poverty index. When you apply that measure is used instead of the monetary poverty measure, it then it increases female-headed poverty. Okay, so when we talk about feminization of poverty, these are the characteristics, right? And when you look at it, you'll say, hey, it looks like B40 also, but you know, it is poverty, so it will look similar, but there's some different characteristics. One is, of course, financial instability, precarious livelihood, low educational attainment, inadequate, inaccessible social protection and support systems, multiple care responsibilities, compromised well-being of children and family and so on. And I purposely chose the three because I didn't want to put a male and female, but you know, just to depict a single lone parent household. But here you see mainly it's the multiple care responsibilities, the access to social protection, compromised well-being of the children and family issues. So contextualizing the single parent demographic. When you look on the left, these are international figures, right? So let's look at the households headed by fathers in US, UK, and Canada alone, 3.2 million. But in Malaysia, we don't have that kind of data. No one's collecting that, right? Lone parent households headed by women, 84%. 14% of world children are living in single parent households. In 89 countries, 101 million mothers live alone with their children. So these are quite glaring numbers, but we are not collecting this kind of data to actually show us in a granular way the issues. So in terms of data, I put here that single fathers, there's no specific data. Single mothers, we know that 2.78% of the population, which is now reported in the recent census, 910,000. And we must also take note, not all may be B40. They don't say that all are B40. Not all may be B40, right? And also to take note on the flip side that many may be invisible because the census doesn't cover everyone. And also that Sabah has, Jain may be interested, Sabah has the highest number at 22%, right? Single mothers. And many such families are also living in extended households. So they're not necessarily staying together, and especially in the male single fathers tend to gravitate towards having extended family around because of the childcare. Right? Now, evidence also shows that female-headed households indeed have a higher probability of being poor, and that's from World Bank. That's way back in 2010, but still so relevant. And so contextualizing again the single parent demographic, now some gender considerations. Firstly, let's look at the definition. What do they say in the definition? This is the Kementerian Wanita definition. This is a definition, I think, from 2015, I think, where it says that married widows or divorced, separated permanently, and have unmarried children in the same household, have a husband. The husband may be unwell or unable to work, or they may have unmarried children in the same household. Also can be women who are never married but have children with adopted children, out of wedlock children. So again, this current definition that resides with Kementerian Wanita, only looking at women, single mothers. Again, the definition is only for female-headed households. Having a clear definition, we know, of single fathers as a distinct category can enable specific policies and aid to be formulated to meet their unique needs and circumstances. So there's no cookie cutter approach, right? Back to lived realities. But we know that Budget 2021 and 2022 gave single fathers the due recognition as a target group, and now they're eligible to get the BKK, Bantuan Kanak-Kanak, right? So they're eligible for that cash transfers with the single mothers as well, right? Now, different situations and status of single mothers also need to be considered within their contextual reality. So this is where the issue of like Ibu Tinggal come, right? But now, I think it's still there. They informally, JKM says that you can go and get a letter from somebody to endorse that, but it's not widely known. So more often than not, they're not accepted. Now, next is men and women experience life differently. Now, that's another very important point. So that understanding these differentiated realities is critical to providing targeted support. But if the current available data is not disaggregated by income, stratum, other multidimensional factors, the actual number of single mothers will likely include vulnerable and more affluent single mothers lumped in a single category. So if you don't do that kind of data disaggregation, you're going to find they're all going to be lumped, and then you're trying to give one size fits all kind of policy, which is very dangerous, especially at this time. Now, this does not also allow a deeper analysis to understand the challenging lived realities of single mothers and fathers, and will cause a likelihood that there'll be a significant number to slip through the cracks, which is what APPGM's work is finding every time we go to the park, right? Now, when we look at single fathers, the global evidence is there, and I'll just pick one or two, that they have also compared to partner, they say partner fathers or married men, a significantly lower income and a higher risk of unemployment. They also have a higher mortality rate, which is found to be 3 times greater. It's in the report citation. Health, well-being, productivity, and so on. And they're also difficult to cope. Now, this is the biggest thing for them, because you know that because of gender norms, that women are normally take on the burden of care. So when a person becomes a single father, that becomes a predominant issue that they have to be concerned about. This is where extended family comes in. So we also hear from our Akar Umbi in our APPGM work, the Malaysian fathers, they say the time spent with children was limited, as I had to earn a living to meet the family's needs. Some were also forced to send their children to full-time caregivers, and that's from Merbok. From Kalabakan, the father said childcare does not necessarily come naturally for fathers, as they focused as the main breadwinner, while the wife took on caregiving and household responsibilities. And again, in Merbok, they say it's a lone parent situation. Some fathers express how challenging parenting is, particularly in raising girls. Right? So imagine in a household, if shared responsibility was there from the beginning, would it look really different? Would it look much better and more positive outcomes, even if they had became single fathers, right? Now, single mothers, we know the issues I've raised it, but then let me look at the one on the right, where it says single mothers' concerns may be best considered and understood within the historical and current context of intergenerational structural inequalities faced by women. Every woman in this room and every man in this room has grown up. We are the products of generations of social norms, right? So what we do in our actions is determined by that. We need to recognize that, number one. Number two is that these structural inequalities, gender, ethnicity, disability, socioeconomic status, nationality, education, marital status, they often overlap and intersect in ways that create and compound deprivation, disadvantage. And this is what we call the concept of intersectionality. When you look at a person, I have to look at you, not just where you are right now, but from your other identities as well. Yeah. So these intersections matter as they impact the day-to-day lives of people, and therefore they cannot be seen as separate single issues. You have to map it out to understand the real lived reality of that person. Yeah. So recognizing the multidimensional issues faced particularly by those who are and risk being left behind is critical. And then it requires providing integrated interventions in order to break the vicious cycle and respond to people's specific needs. Now more than ever, we have to. I feel that in the delivery of social protection, even into the B40, don't have to think whether they are a man or woman. Just taking a gender responsive approach can already uncover and unpack a lot of those lived realities you don't realize in federal or in the state. So here is a quote by UNICEF, which says that addressing poverty in the family has positive effects on the outcomes across a range of SDGs. Again, we say gender is cross-cutting, right? So it's not just one SDG, and that's for many issues in the SDGs as well. So for instance, addressing measures of poverty and multiple deprivation links to the achievement of some of the SDG targets by facilitating families' abilities to meet the goals. So I feel that is a very important thing which we are also doing in the APPGM. We are facilitating families' abilities. We are not saying we are facilitating government to just give the money and cash handout. We are empowering families on the ground, to meet the goals related to personal subsistence, access to services, utilities, and access to broader learning and labor market. So I feel this is a way in which we can look at the whole of society approach. So it's not just asking government to do, yeah? Okay. So let's go into see what were some of the issues that were raised at the grassroots lived realities, right? The parliamentary constituency. So this is from the 27, but not all will be seen here, just a few. So some of the issues I've sort of compiled it under several headings. One is economic hardship. So the grassroots focus group findings shared, like for example, Paripunta. I won't read all, yeah? I'll just pick on some, you can read from the report. Paribunta, they say that married women are usually unemployed and dependent on their husbands and their children's income. So that is historical, intergenerational, that is your norm, right? And they don't earn additional income sometimes because they feel so contented and so hopeful that the husband and we will always be together forever, right? So this condition of dependency during marriage places single mothers in extremely vulnerable situation when left to manage the family without the main breadwinner, right? So with this kind of precarious beginning, what are we looking? Single mothers have expressed that they are unable to afford the basic necessities, including ones for their children's education. Things like that, collateralizing. Right? And then they also said when they entered single parenthood, lacking the requisite skills needed to enter employment or start a business, which is from Beaufort. And in Nenggeri, Musang, they say it's not uncommon for them to earn between 30 to 50 ringgit a day. So let's think about what that can get you, right? Okay, so here, sorry, it's a little small, but this one is looking at their precarious livelihoods. So single mothers express challenges in entering the job market as they lack the necessary skills and were financially dependent on husbands. So that was said earlier. But when they do find work, now this, what we hear on the ground confirms what we know in the data. The data says that women's participation in the labor market is informal. It is, which makes it precarious because you don't get social protection. You don't always get social protection. You may not even get paid. Right, in unpaid kind of family work also. And also there is gender job segregation. So you find them in service, in health, in education, and not everywhere else. And that is got to do, we have to go back to the root cause of it. And it's got to do with those social norms. So when they do find work, it's irregular, where most are wage earners, that Tengah Batu said, as shop assistants, cleaners, mosque workers. So just try to imagine how much they would earn. And it's not because they're not able to. How come the men can earn more? Why is it the women earn less? Age is also an impediment when they are seeking employment in Kuala Karai. Not all single mothers are young, right? There's some single mothers who became single mothers when they're older, right? And it affects the women who become single mothers at an older age. So some engaged in agricultural work, like rubber tappers, found that the earnings, where they only receive 40% of the sale, those who are doing agriculture, this is an interesting point I found, right? That they only earn 40% of the sale, and which does not commensurate with the number of hours of work, my book said. And juggling, of course, they come back. They can't just sit and maybe plan for the next day's work. They have to juggle work and care responsibilities, which are pressing, challenging. It puts a lot of pressure on and impacts the overall well-being outcomes, not only of the single mother, but also on the children. So that's from Bukit Mertajam Mobile. I'll just read that next one and then I'll move on. It says here, when I was a homemaker, I didn't know how to earn a living, but now as a single mother, I have to be independent. Life has been difficult, but slowly and with much effort, I will try to earn to support my children. I work 2 shifts day and night in a restaurant. Supporting my children was my motivation to continue living. And the mental and physical trauma I suffered cannot be compared. With no alimony, which is very common, also in Malay families, also very common. Yeah, I have to bear all expenses, and now I sell cakes for a living. So that's from my mother in contact. We move to the next one. So the other one is inaccessible social protection and safety net, also information disconnect. And here you find that the single mothers have expressed that it's difficult to get help from welfare department. I'm not telling you what you haven't heard of. And we don't know how to apply, right? Everywhere we go, same story. Yeah, some indicated that only those who are impoverished should be eligible from Paripurna, and that viewing poverty beyond income status could provide a more empathetic lens on the lived realities of the families, right? Some of these are based, a lot of it is still based on income level, right? The other thing which I may miss out if I don't cover everything is the intra-household poverty. We cannot assume. So now there's some talk internationally of looking at individual multidimensional poverty index rather than just looking at the household, right? Looking individually, because within the household, you may have, let's say, like you may have the wife, the head of household, maybe the husband is in earning, breadwinner. Then the wife, then you have an older person, you may have an OKU, not uncommon, a lot of you heard the PPR stories, and you can't be guaranteed that the money that's coming in, the cash welfare that's coming in, is equitably distributed to all of them. So there will be some in the household who are poorer than the others, right? So the poor is more than just income, right? Based on the other elements. Okay, so if I move on, they said that they say they're not aware of the government aid available to them. They also say, is that coming up? Okay, I'll go to the last one. Okay, the older women, okay, let's not miss out the older women who are not married and others who have working children also frustrated. Now, this is the other point, right? Now, if you have working children, we cannot assume that the working children, even if the working children live in a bungalow, you are not eligible for aid, but the working children may not even take care of you. Then what do you do? Right? So this is where you need to look at it in a broader sense, a multidimensional. Okay, balancing livelihood and caregiving. After this, I go into recommendations. Just telling the timekeeper. So balancing livelihoods, caregiving, and well-being. What we found is that the unstable income and work have a drastic effect on children progressing in their education. Now, this is something I don't think enough research is done on the well-being of the children. Yeah, something to consider with the researchers. Many children only complete up to Form 3. Children's education needs and costs are most needed as the take-home wages are insufficient to pay for these costs. Children also may lose interest, malu kan pergi sekolah, then tak ada all these things that you need to take with you. Childcare also does not necessarily come naturally for fathers, as they focus as the main breadwinner while the wife took on the caregiving. So, and also single mothers do not have the flexibility to work and send the children to school. There are also latchkey children. And when I was staying in Singapore, this is quite common in the poor families. Latchkey means I lock you in, don't fly out the window, stay safe, don't turn on the gas, right? Latchkey children, lots of danger, who are left to fend for themselves at home because the mother needs to work. And wages are low and work is inconsistent. As a result, children and mothers may be undernourished, and in turn, their ability to focus in school is impacted. And you can't blame them if they drop out. I won't blame the kids at all, right? The system has failed us. The situation of the old mother is dire, and so much so that she neglects her own well-being. If you look at SDG 2, you will see in UN Women's website that the mothers eat last. In your own homes, do you ever see a mother sit and eat first? No, right? Mothers always will eat last. Settle everybody first. So in a home where you have that much of food, if father, so sorry. Father. Betul ke? Okay. Okay. So, but that's the reality, even in the most urban and T20 homes. So there's a social norm there, you know. Why does the mother feel like she feels like she cannot sit until everybody is taken care of, including the father, right? So in extended family situations, older grandmothers are having to care for the children, which is also what we heard on the ground, which poses a burden. So some people may say, hey, kan ada extended family, suruh mereka jagalah. But these are older persons, right? So some face challenging situations with their older children who succumb to social forces and draw them to drugs, gangs, and alcohol. And I think those who went to Bukit Mertajam, Tangga Batu, Gua Musang, Situ, you'd have heard about these social forces that draw these children away, right? Because they don't feel a need to go to school anymore, right? So let me go to recommendations. So those were just some of the issues, a lot more in the report itself. Here you see that number one, I put here that the issues raised in the report are grassroots depiction of socioeconomic situation of single mothers. It reinforces the fact that their life experience is highly gendered by pre-existing social cultural norms, resulting in discrimination, inadequate access to resources, diminishing voice and agency, all of which compound and exacerbate their precarious lone parent situation. Now, friends, I want to say and also underscore that the list of situations that I've given you here, where even for access to resources, do not assume that anyone from the T20 can also have that. If there is dominance or discrimination at home, that person will not have access to even go out without asking permission, right? So the key persistent issues that were raised include economic hardship in not being able to adequately support dependent children and for their own well-being, financial insecurity from low-paying precarious jobs, lacking skills and capacity to secure better jobs or scale up their business, right? If you look at the report, you also see many of them can't even access aid la, bantuan la. That's a lot of politics, not our partisan politics, but lots of politics as to who gets it between Ketua Kampung and the Jabatan and all the people who are giving it, right? Lacking skills, capacity to secure better jobs and scale up the business, poor access to social protection, compromised health, education, well-being of children. So at the public policy and governance level, there has to be much interest and attention in formulating policies, action plans, and programs and social protection schemes to address the needs of single mothers and elevate them from, I can't see what I put there. What is the word there? It's blocking. Can you all see that? From their situation. Okay, however, the poverty level of single mothers is concerning and the number of female-headed households continues to increase, right? It calls for a reconceptualization of the approaches in addressing the B40 population. So policy recommendation number one is to understand the actual situation of single mothers and fathers. So from a gender speak, when you look at the gender speak, you have to do a gender impact assessment. Otherwise, you won't know what is the real situation. So to do that, you must have data. To do that, you must understand the methodology, right? So expand the current sex desegregated data to include gender desegregated data, which considers basic needs, including employment, social protection, beneficiary analysis, children's education, health, access to resources, social services, to understand the lived realities of single parent. This is not an exhaustive list, yeah. And also number two, with the data, conduct a gender impact assessment to better inform and formulate targeted interventions. Policy recommendation number two is to strengthen institutional mechanisms for effective service delivery. Number one is to consider rolling out a robust implementation monitoring framework and impact assessment. This one, I think, in all areas of governance, we fall flat on our feet. To measure progress of the National Action Plan on Single Mothers. There's no report on the National Action Plan on Single Mothers, and there's no indication that there's going to be another National Action Plan because it's already over, right? Its term is over. To deliver on results which can reflect transformative outcomes in the lives of the single parents. So transformative outcomes is what APPGM does in its work. We go down, we empower people to stand on their own feet and become agents of change in their own lives. And that is a transformative change. That means you can walk away and they'll be okay. Number two is to streamline social protection schemes delivered by various agencies. Bank Negara in their report said that there are more than 60, right? But then EKASE, if you go to the EKASE analysis, also they said 3,000 over schemes in the agencies. Who's talking to whom? No wonder the chief statistician at the SDG steering committee meeting said that there was actually duplication in terms of peruntukan yang terima. Right. Number three is to institute gender mainstreaming and gender responsive budgeting. And this is something we're already I'm personally working with MOF on this already. Now, this is tied up closely with the earlier recommendations. Gender mainstreaming and gender responsive budgeting are well-documented positive strategies for creating inclusive and resilient communities. Now, this is from growing global evidence. Yeah? How do they do it? By considering the needs, the priorities, and the gender dynamics of women and men, boys and girls, to develop gender responsive solutions and equitable resources for all. Policy number three, there are only four. Yeah? So policy recommendation number three, close the gap on accessing resources. Number one, to closing the gap on access to information on welfare and programs is critical because more and more we keep on hearing yang apa tu BK apa, right? We need a more concrete plan to engage community partners formally to undertake this. Institutionalizing partnerships and mobilizing community networks, faith-based organizations, and working with existing grassroots structures. When the floods took place in Selangor, it was not the government that rescued. Who came forward? It was the civil society organizations. It was people. The people came forward. Right? So this is the time we need to use those examples to go back to policymakers and tell them, hey, people on the ground can do it. They're capable. So institutionalize the partnership and work with the existing grassroots structures. For example, housing associations, they're all quite, I don't know whether you heard the PPR, they have all their structures. They have structures, so work with them. Housing associations, block representatives, village heads, state assembly persons, members of parliament, CSOs, to disseminate the information. We have the governance structure, right? But it's not coordinated. And to support the registration of the B40 population. Now, last one is to build in monitoring, using a built-in monitoring mechanism to help address the need as well as generate better informed policy formulation. And this is, again, I think in all areas. Okay, last one. Policy recommendation number 4, empower and build resilient single-parent households. At the end of the day, I think today the buzzword is community resilience. That's a buzzword. How to strengthen community support systems and networks, building on recommendation 3, through a systematic and coordinated plan to work with government agencies on a wider range of government supports, community support services. And this will allow for a broader and more effective outreach and support to vulnerable communities. They essentially need to know who in their neighborhood can help them. And we have structures that can create that kind of close access. Provide targeted financial childcare support for B40 families. Right now, what is given is just tax exemption. So if you are primarily in the informal sector, mana you bayar tax, right? And we've said that for a few years. 2023 budget in October said the same thing, tax exemption. So provide targeted financial childcare support for B40 families by expanding the current JKM registered home-based community childcare centers like what Maria had in P105 and utilizing existing community Tadika, Tabika, like the Kemas, the Tadika Perpaduan and all that. They have that. They have those structures, but use them to provide affordable and accessible care arrangements for these families. Now, one more thing I want to add here is that one of the recommendations for our gender responsive budgeting that we put to MOF was that wherever you provide cash handouts, welfare, in the same community, if you do a childcare program, then you know the parents, the mothers are now free to go to work, do an empowerment program, job placement and all that. So you see whether that method works, you know. So you give the welfare here, but you do the grant and the upskilling somewhere else. Do it with the same community and learn from them. Now, finally, extend targeted support to B40 single fathers to enable them to cope with similar work and childcare issues. First of all, recognize them by getting the data. So with that, thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much, Ms. Omna, for the very wonderful presentation. So we invite Dr. Sharifah to do the review.
Okay. Assalamualaikum and a very good evening to everyone. Thank you so much, Ms. Omna, for very informative and thorough explanation about single parents. Of course, at first, when I look at single parents, it's actually single mother, the one that, having all this problem. You're not supposed to even mention single father. That was my first impression. Okay. Then your description about single father challenges opened my eyes that, these are the, important thing that the challenge that also faced by the single father, although it might be a little bit different. Okay, they are expected to work, they are expected to be strong, but they are not being expected to take care of their children, although they are single, they don't have anybody else to help them taking care of the children. Okay, so thank you so much for this inclusive paper. So it's not just now we are moving towards better gender equality rather than just focusing on single mother. But of course, in terms of percentage, as mentioned in your paper, the probability for a single mother to face poverty is higher. That's for sure. So in the context for the issue, I just follow this side. All right. Okay. So you did highlight it. One of the most important group of people, the furthest behind, and a single parent issue, and also contextualize about this female and also single single father and mother household challenges. Yeah. And you did highlight it about the intersectional challenges and how these challenges push this population to poverty. And I think we have heard this quite a number of times. I heard last time from Doctor, so now from even people. Yeah, last round in ISIS, right? Okay. So the thing that I'm kind of like on asking, there are 27 constituencies, but it's not written. The list, maybe just the list, and also how you pick or how you did the interviews and collect all those narratives. Okay, and whether it is during your field trip or during which time, whether you have a specific arrangement to interview them or it is actually during other programs. Okay, so I'm kind of like wondering, when did you collect the data? Yeah, so maybe we can highlight that in terms of methodology. I think this paper highlighted most important challenges and also the situation, like growing for B40 population, and the thing about efficacy of the government agencies lah. Okay, we are talking about single mother, single father, they having this double, triple burden and so forth. I think JKM officers also having that problem, whereby they are also doing too many things and taking care of a very big population. So yes, we can recommend all this policy. Definitely, it's a feasible policies, recommendations, and definitely you took it from other countries' best practices too, right? I mean the recommendations. Yeah. So if we can go and see maybe best practices from other places, then this can be more concrete kind of policy recommendation. That okay, in Canada this is what they are doing, in Indonesia this is the community supports that they. So when we have this example, I mean the current implementation in other countries, then it may make the government able to see it well, yeah, and maybe can implement it better. So, but I'm sure that is not that easy thing to do. It can be done, right? So, for example, like strengthen community support system and network. We kind of like maybe like in a flat area. So the AJK of the community of the committee of that flat area can come up with a system. What kind of a support system? So if we can do like maybe APPGM would like to do like a kind of like this initial or preliminary project with one flat area, okay, how to actually create the community support system, right? Then it's successful, then we can actually show it and amplify it. So because we've been talking about this childcare, financial supports over and over again, and then they end up talking about, okay, it's okay, tax exemption. But B40, even some of the M40, they don't really pay tax, especially after COVID, and also due to, they don't have to. Yeah, so we need to have maybe some kind of like feasible that the government can like, oh, it's not that difficult. I think we can do this. I mean, practical kind of example. I mean, I can just give you this comment. I'm also still puzzling about it, although we hear this so, repetitively since a long time ago. So NCWO, we always mention about this too, right? So that is, I think in terms of recommendation, I love the recommendation was the data. Forever, data is like forever. I went to this never-ending story, okay, about insufficient data and so forth. I went to Infra. Infra is Institute Research untuk Luar Bandar. Okay, even for them, they have this problem in terms of data. Okay, and they are supposed to be the person, an institute that collect all the data for rural areas. So even for them, they have this problem. Yeah. So I believe this paper, in terms of elaborating the issues and challenges, it's really clear. We really love to read. The narratives. You have highlighted the narratives very well, and also in terms of connecting SDG. I like the grassroots and the SDG. What are the SDG? What we call it, the subtopic 5, uncovering the grassroots and the grassroots realities. Yeah. So and then you connect it with which SDGs. Yeah. So that one is really a good approach of analysis that a lot of people can also follow for other topics. Yeah. Yeah. So just in terms of number one, the methodology, and number two, this is, I think, everybody's desire to make things a very, very practical, and we can do it tomorrow. I know my recommendation. And all right, I think definitely Omna talking about a gender responsive budget. Yeah, it's easy to say and done. I'm sure you experience it, and something that I'm kind of like feels sad when you mention system failed the children. Yeah, I mean, we are in capitalist world that many parents work 12 hours a day. Like Kilang, so 12 hours, restaurant and all this. Yeah, 2 shifts, right? 12 hours. And not including back and forth to work. So that one will be another 2 hours. So 14 hours at outside. So in this sense, I think we heard this repeatedly. At the end of the day, anything happened to the children, again, we blame the parents. And then ada akta, kecuaian and all those. Okay, so it kind of like a vicious cycle. And if you are poor, you'll be left behind. Right? And you will be blamed at the end of the day, just because you have to work. You know, and you lalai tinggalkan anak, like what Omna said just now. So this kind of this is a vicious cycle. It keeps on happening again and again. And again, I also only can highlight, like Omna, but in terms of the solution, like what I said, suddenly I just remember the flat area, because Omna mentioned about the children, you know, you just lock them in the house and then make sure you don't jump. There are children jumped. I think last few months ago, one child jumped, 5 years old, 4-year-old jumped the building. So, and because the mother went out to be a cleaner, you know. Okay. So this is the thing that I think our Kementerian Wanita, they are listening. Yeah, our MPs are listening. But in terms of feasibility and how to do things, again, we mentioned the same thing. We need more social workers. Our social workers are also burnout. Yeah, they work Saturday, Sunday, and all those. Yeah, 1/8,000. If you look in Australia, we can have totally different, maybe 1 out of 10, or out of 100. Maybe because they have a very small population too. But we can actually put the comparison between this country in terms of social workers. I think social workers is really needed in our country. And luckily we have PGM, NGOs to help out. And also, of course, in terms of synergy, how to work together also is a good suggestion. So thank you. I will give this when I have typed it, meaning the whole thing. All right. Thank you so much.